Alright, let's go into two more movies where we've got obviously the big new movie from this weekend and something that I caught up on because I just really wasn't in much of a hurry to see it. But let's go ahead and start with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which I I don't really know exactly how to just dive into it because I feel like at least from Infinity War forward, we've been doing this thing with the MCU where I kind of have trouble talking about it without. We usually just kind of devolve into just talking about the MCU in general, more than just the individual movies themselves, which I don't know if you could say is kind of a criticism of these movies, I guess, despite how much I love them, obviously. And I just, our last one was No Way Home, which I couldn't praise enough, so going right into this, which obviously is also not only it's obviously it's Doctor Strange 2 technically, but it's like Doctor Strange has been through so much, and we're really continuing off of like it how it almost feels more like a direct sequel to WandaVision. It and the first Doctor Strange just feel so far away from each other. And only 6 years feels like a long time and also no time at all when you think about how much has passed between these two movies and where the character is now. But the fact that this also is just as much about Wanda, if not more so, in some cases it feels like. But as far as going into this, where I've said before that, and surely if you've been here you realize that I am really into the MCU. Me and my brother have done so many videos on it at this point, and all the different stuff, all the TV series and stuff like that. And there is definite hype going into this, especially with how much we've built up to this point, and that's where I praised No Way Home a lot, was just the sort of general thing of where we've gotten in this franchise and how it's like in any other series you would think, once you reach something like Endgame, there can't possibly be anything else. But yet the doors just sort of keep opening up. And it's really just a question now of how far through those doors they're willing to go. And if they're, like, how far past the idea stage are they going to be going? Because I could see there's going to be at least two groups of people that go into this with preconceived notions. There's going to be the people that are the diehard fans that are going to love this no matter what and defend it to the death. And then you have the other people where there's a very large group of people that just feel like these movies are going in circles at this point, and we're even despite all these big ideas they're opening up, that at their core the movies still seem to kind of be the same thing or follow the same formula. And those people especially have something to fall back on now with this one because, like I mentioned when I talked about this movie previously, we did just have Everything Everywhere All at Once also doing the multiverse thing. And so you're going to have a lot of people saying, like, because of you have that movie that's sort of, it's from A24, which is like a company that tries so hard to be the anti-blockbuster or whatever, or anti-mainstream or whatever, that they have something to latch onto now to say that this thing is ultimately better than this thing, even though I haven't watched this thing or anything like that. And so it's a whole lot of that, and I'm just kind of sitting here in the middle. I like the ideas of Everything Everywhere All at Once, but they didn't really, just those directors in general just have a style of blending that with absurdity and stuff like that just doesn't really work for me. Um, and so going into this, it's kind of the same thing where it's like, okay, now that I know what kind of ideas they have, how exactly we're going to expand on those. And I'm not by any means turning on the MCU or anything, but I have mentioned before that me and my brother are eventually going to do a video on it soon. But we just finished Moon Knight yesterday. Like, Moon Knight just wrapped up yesterday. And I really wasn't big on Moon Knight at all. So it was kind of like, and not that, because these are so far have not collided, it wasn't necessarily my opinion of Moon Knight itself being so fresh, especially made me go into this, and it's like, oh, I wonder, if that was just one thing that because I think most people are really into Moon Knight, so that's just a me thing. So my big question is, did I feel like, just with that having been last night, am I going into this feeling soured on the MCU just a tiny bit, despite all the great things they've done already? And that ended up not really being the case. So, like I said, that's the way MCU reviews are going to go now, just jumping around everywhere. This is going to be completely incoherent. So that's the thing that was really driving this, though. The thing that really, really was piquing interest was the fact that Sam Raimi was directing this one. And the thing about that is a number of things. First off, not only did he do his three Spider-Man movies, so he's already in this regard, and you could really even throw Darkman into that also, with him kind of already being in this genre. But then add on his background in horror. And the thing about this was, and this is probably what we'll spend most of our time talking about, is the fact that was Sam Raimi going to get to make a Sam Raimi movie, or was he going to have to make another Marvel movie? Because even before the first Doctor Strange movie was out, like when the first Doctor Strange movie was getting ready to come out, not being somebody that's knows much about the comics, I was told a lot. Doctor Strange is going to have to be like a horror movie, or at least a borderline horror movie, because that's the kind of stuff that it goes into. And of course, the director of the first Doctor Strange movie was Scott Derrickson, who obviously has a horror background, like Sinister, and he's getting ready to do the Black Phone and stuff like that. And it still felt like like the stuff that they did with it was still really wild and had some really trippy imagery in it and stuff like that. But not really that horror vibe that you would. It still felt like a Marvel movie, despite having a director that has a known style that is mainly based in horror. So I was kind of afraid of coming into a Sam Raimi movie and sort of just seeing another Marvel movie. Not that another Marvel movie is bad, but it's still nice when you kind of when you see like what Taika Waititi did with Ragnarok, and you can see the director kind of break through a little bit. And while it's still a Marvel movie, they still basically got to make their movie, is what you can see. And the big question to me was if that was going to be what Raimi got to do here, and especially since horror had been promised a while back and wasn't really delivered on. So I think we can safely say that at least by the time we get to the second half of this movie, yeah, Raimi did, for the most part, get to make a Raimi movie. Um, Stuff that were like if you were to see all of his movies together, like in a montage form, I could see imagery in this perfectly blending in with his previous output. And I was kind of looking for that I was kind of looking for the Raimi touches for a lot of it, and you do see that, like some of the ways the camera moves, or like the transitions, or there's like one really interesting transition where it's like a close up of Wong sort of fading into the scene. There's a lot of like monster point of view shots when something's attacking. There's a point in time where we get about maybe 10 minutes into the movie's literally just started, and we're already on our second action scene, which of course is going to be really big and really CGI heavy. And at first it was kind of underwhelming because it's like you see, Doctor Strange fighting a big monster in the city. It just literally looks like a scene out of Infinity War, just without, Tony and Peter around. And while that was playing like that for a while, the way in which they defeat this monster, I found surprisingly gruesome. And it was like, okay, there I can see kind of the Raimi touches coming out a little bit. Okay, and then as it goes on, because well, he's also brought Elfman back with him, so obviously there's an underlying score also that really kind of helps the horror vibe also. But the big question I was asking through these first couple of big CGI fight scenes was, I wonder when we're getting Wanda and when that's really gonna go off, because the end of WandaVision really set up. Because my big question when WandaVision ended was, is Wanda gonna be a villain now? And my first thought was, since they made her so, like, the whole point of WandaVision was to make her, as sympathetic and tragic as possible to show the drive that she has to do the things that she does. Are they going to commit to making her a full-blown villain? And when WandaVision ended, I just kind of didn't see, even with that post-credit scene, it was like, I still don't see them completely committing to making Wanda a full-blown villain. And the antagonist of this movie. And we yeah, we get that, and they do commit, and it's the way, what I really appreciate also was the way that they committed without sacrificing what they had built up with her as a character, how it still shows what she's driven by, but it does make her probably one of the scarier villains we've had in the MCU up to this point, which is great. And I don't know. I have no idea how to handle spoilers. Like if I go into some kind of spoiler, I'll put it in like the title and stuff like that, or have Owen put it in the title. But I really have no idea what people know and what people don't, because it feels like the really annoying thing about doing the thing that I do, where I avoid advertisements, I try to avoid information, I certainly avoid trailers. It's really fucking annoying trying to do that for a Marvel movie, because people are either obsessed with finding things out early, or they themselves are obsessed with giving us more information as it comes out, throwing out more clips, throwing out more information, possible casting choices, and everybody seems to figure out everything before it comes out, and I don't even know where the joy is in that. Where it's like there were, I guess, leaks a few days ago, and I guess those were plastered everywhere. And it's like, why do people want to know those things early? I don't understand where that comes from. But so there's a lot of stuff in here that would have been great surprises. But the thing is there are things where you hear rumors even before, like leaks or whatever happen. You hear rumors about certain things, and it's gotten to the point now to where more often than not rumors eventually become true. So there was a lot in this that I felt like would have been really big moments, like really big surprise moments, but it's like people just hinted at them enough that it was like, oh, so okay, so we are going down this route. Okay, I wasn't quite sure, but now it's been confirmed we were in fact going down this route. Okay, I think most people knew that, unfortunately. And I just really miss the days where stuff just came out and you just didn't really know anything. And it's like, and the thing about that also is that Marvel was really good about that for a while. Like I remember when Endgame came out, I feel like nobody knew anything. Like, apparently the trailers really didn't show anything. Like, apparently all the stuff in Endgame's trailers was footage from, like, the first 15 minutes of the movie or something. And nobody knew what to expect going in. Nobody knew that Thanos was going to lose his head in the first 10 minutes or anything. Like, nobody knew that. And it's like, but now that we're back in it, and now that the movies aren't quite as big as Endgame was, and we're still kind of in a middle ground here, everybody just wants information early, and they seem very willing to give it out or throw hints that seem subtle but kind of aren't really out there. So that's kind of unfortunate. I would have liked for a lot of the surprises in this. I would have liked for all of the surprises in this to have been actual surprises, but like I said, even rumors from months ago can eventually just turn into something, and then it's all the mysticism of what to expect and what's going to come next is just kind of gone. There's still some stuff in here that I didn't know was coming, and there's, admittedly, like I said, I'm not much for the comics. I had to look up when I got on, so there's that also. But yeah, so that's kind of what a lot of, like, I guess the middle portion would be, where it's like this is where a lot of the impact would come in. But at the same time, there is stuff like, in No Way Home with Maguire and Garfield. That's much like what I was talking about here, where it's like they never officially confirmed it, but we all went in knowing what was happening. Yet there was still something in that worked. Like the effect was still there anyway, even if it really wasn't a surprise necessarily. But here it feels like they're throwing in so much at this point, especially with I guess the thing also is just the multiverse concept in general leaves you expecting to see things now that we're, really crossing over and doing a lot of different stuff. But there is another problem I feel like we have with the multiverse thing. And honestly, I feel like this actually didn't even start necessarily with the multiverse angle so much as I guess this is in a way the same thing. The time travel stuff they brought into Endgame, where it's like there will be deaths that happen, but it's getting to a point now to where that was a problem way back with the X-Men movies, where like it felt like there were no stakes at all because nobody ever stayed dead. And now we get to the point to where there are deaths happening, But now that we're in this multiverse angle, none of those deaths really hold weight now that we know there's like all kinds of different ones out there. Kind of like how Thanos saying no resurrections this time when he killed Loki, and it's like okay, well, technically it wasn't a resurrection because that's not the Loki that we're seeing now, but still, it's a cop out. It's exactly a cop out. So that's probably one of my main problems, or probably my main problem with the whole multiverse angle. As cool as it is stakes are kind of out the window with it. At least as far as individual characters and their fates. Because nothing is, now that the multiverse has been like introduced, nothing is ever gonna feel final when we lose characters now. So that's just, which I guess is why they've just started committing to not killing their villains, as we saw in No Way Home. Where it's like the whole plot of that was literally the whole plot of No Way Home is let's make sure the villains don't die when they go back. So that's kind of sucking a little bit out of it, I think. But going back to the fact that this is essentially Raimi getting to make a Raimi movie inside the MCU, and that is very satisfying. Where we get, when I was talking about with Wanda, where we kind of just wait for her introduction. And at first, it was like, to my understanding, the last credit scene of No Way Home was a trailer for this, so I did manage to avoid that. I left after the Venom scene. So, when we get this scene where Wanda appears normal, and like she's leading this normal life, there was a part of me that was a little confused, because it was like, she looked like she was amping up to be a supervillain in that last shot of WandaVision, so I wonder what this is. But yeah, if you're patient enough, it will come as you in the scene. So yeah, once it's revealed that Wanda is our villain and they are committing to that, then we kind of get. Then the movie finds its footing in a really great way, in a way that's kind of unexpected because you're never quite sure. I was never quite sure how far in they were going to go on the horror angle, and it seemed like as it went, they got more and more into the horror of it, which is great. Because even just starting off, like when Wanda first arrives, just in a giant black cloud, there's just this immediate ominous vibe. And then when she's like coming through the reflections to attack, and it's like, yeah, this is what I didn't really know what my expectations were as far as Doctor Strange going into horror territory, especially based on the first movie. But now it's all starting to kind of come together and make sense. And like I said, the way they really go in on this, and the idea of like when she sees her reflection in a window, and we kind of get that sort of callback to it feels like a Norman Goblin kind of thing happening, but in a surprisingly an even darker kind of way. Certainly in a more supernatural kind of way, in a horror-esque way. And like there's even a point in time during this scene where it's like it's normal Wanda, and then she sees the witch and the reflection, and then I swear Wanda turns and looks directly into the camera, and it's actually pretty chilling, especially when we can get the sense that this is not normal Wanda now, despite still holding that appearance. And the way they handle that also visually, where it's like this is one of those cases also where you can kind of see whether or not a specific director is coming through, or if it's just them making a Marvel movie with the director's name on it. It's the visual flair that they add that you can recognize from the director. Like I was talking about certain camera moves and stuff like that. And then there's the stuff that's I guess you could say it's flashy, but it also works on a character level, where we're seeing normal Wanda interact with her kids, and it's flashes of like Scarlet Witch. And it's like literally flashing back and forth between the two, and it sounds pretty on the nose, and I guess it kind of is, but it still kind of works in the moment, especially visual. Like it's visually jarring on purpose, like in a good way, and really sets up this feeling of discomfort as the witch is getting more and more out of control and unstoppable, and that's and more like a genuine horror movie villain. And that's it's crazy how this actually worked in the sense that they let Raimi commit it looks like as much as they were willing to commit to just letting him make a horror movie at the start of this, where she's chasing them down hallways like it's a slasher movie. There's jump scares in there, which he even put into the first Spider-Man movie quite a bit. And it's and yeah, being able to find that combination again of being able to have it, because you also think about the fact that his first Spider-Man movie was like right at the very beginning of this. Like the only thing that really predates his first Spider-Man movie, as far as superhero movies as we know them now, is that first X-Men movie. So it does feel like we're kind of going way back to the beginning, where they had like this sort of, I don't know if you could say the first Spider-Man movie had a horror element to it, unless we're talking about the Norman, Goblin, Jekyll and Hyde scenes. But here to like really go in on, like, we've got zombies in this, we've got, you know, undead spirits, we've got the book that was introduced, that now, being in a Raimi movie, feels much like another book from a movie series that we know very well, that serves a very similar purpose. And you could say that maybe there's too many callbacks in it. And yes, sometimes that might be overkill, but for the most part I feel like it works here. Like, you go into a Raimi movie, and one of the first things that comes to mind is you want to see Bruce Campbell. And you're going to see Bruce Campbell. And to the point, the second time we see Bruce Campbell, there is a very obvious reference happening. And it's like, in any other circumstance, you might roll your eyes at that and just say, oh, it's a bit on the nose or it's too much. It just, yeah, I was really happy with the Bruce Campbell appearance, both of them. So that's great. But if there's some stuff that I feel like it didn't really touch on as much as it could have, while I do very much praise the horror element to it, and how a lot of the movie is the horror stuff. That's the stuff that I really come away with, of how I think this movie is more success than it isn't. But as far as stuff that I wasn't sure about, it does feel like they open up some stuff here, where they could have, like I was talking about, the commitment of going down those doors that they open, as far as concept. And it's like, we do have that scene where they like fall through the other universes, and it's like that kind of builds up to where it's like you almost like that you want to see them stop and kind of explore those. And that's something where I think you could easily argue that Everything Everywhere All at Once is something that explored that much more, and something that we would have liked to have probably seen in this, especially with a couple of those especially standing out in a way to where it's like how do you even do that? And Everything Everywhere All at Once showed us that you can do, like, even stuff that sounds like it might be impossible, you actually can go into and explore and just see what you can do with the weird, and like really commit to the weird and see what you can do with it. And the fact that we just sort of pass by the weird in one shot might be a bit of a letdown, but because at the same time we do have this story that we have to commit to, but it's like finding ways to kind of be able to play with stuff and tell the story also is where you need to find your balance. And there is some stuff in here that I'm not quite sure about, like the character of America, the girl. I noticed when the movie started, on the very first scene of the movie, as soon as it started, it feels like we're in the middle of another movie. And I immediately, dismissed that in mind, because I was like, yeah, I assume we're supposed to feel that way, because obviously this is going to cross over into our story, and it'll all come together and all that. But, unfortunately, that feeling kind of stuck with this character, because it felt like we were seeing this character who we have to follow through this whole movie, that doesn't really have an introduction. And it's like, yeah, comic readers are going to know who she is, and yeah, probably later on, whether it be a series or another movie or whatever, we'll get more of her and more information on her. But I mean, for her to be like the sort of center of this movie as far as what's going on and what the story is and what exactly Wanda wants, she just feels like a plot device. She feels like a prop when she's like supposed to be one of the major characters. And so when we got to the point to where obviously she's going to be in jeopardy, and it's her that needs not only necessarily saving, but to have that arc to where she can save herself. It's like when we get to this big moment for this character, it's like, I still don't know who the fuck you are, really. And it's like, I know what your purpose in the plot is, but I'm not really sure, who you are as a character. And that's another thing where I just kind of wonder if it's either a case of we're now spoiled by the TV series we've been getting in this universe, or the writers have been spoiled by the TV series, because it's like the series, like we saw with Wanda, the series can really take that time and take 6 or 8 episodes and really give us a character and really delve into a character. For the most part, if they're doing it right, like at least half of them have, um, that they have that time, and it's like, but now it's almost like they think, if we're okay, so if we're gonna commit our character stuff to the series, we can just have the movies be, just spectacle and not much else, and save the character for, the TV stuff. And that's kind of a problem, because I feel like if you went into this not having seen WandaVision, it gives you enough pieces to know what's going. It gives you enough pieces to catch up with what's going on. But if you were to just go into this like that, there's not a whole lot of Wanda character that we saw. There's one thing they point out here that I don't know if it's come up yet, but I remember having like kind of an epiphany moment when she brought it up. It's in her first scene in this movie. That there's a beef because Strange is the one that gave the Time Stone up to Thanos, and that's ultimately what... I mean, obviously Vision was going to die anyway, but the gruesome manner, I guess you could call it, in which Vision dies that second time, could not have happened if Strange had not given him the Time Stone at the time that he did, because it was literally right before that. So that beef is there, and we've seen, that Wanda's that kind of character where it's not going to register with her. It's not going to resonate with her that, oh, Vision was going to die anyway, or, that was the only way to save the entire existence of everything, or the half existence of everything. So that beef there does make sense. But as far as that, all the character work seems to have been done in the series, and I know you can probably say that makes sense because the movies are in theaters and they've got the big screen, so use that for the spectacle and then do the... But there should definitely be something here that feels like a complete experience when you go to a movie. Because, yeah, there's always going to be stuff that's, seeds being planted for later movies and stuff like that, or later characters or whatever. But you still want to come out of the movies feeling like you've got something complete. And then there's a little thing that says, oh, and now this will get you excited for the next thing. But it does seem like we are at a point now where it feels like things are more open-ended than they should be. Like, there's... Like, the way this movie ends, without saying too much, is... Like, I don't know how to word it without just saying it. But it's like, is that exactly what we saw? I don't know. Regarding one particular character. So, I don't know. I have no idea if we're even anticipating a character. Because, like I said, nothing feels final anymore now that we've introduced the multiverse. As far as individual characters go. So, I don't know. As far as as far as this being a sequel to the first Doctor Strange movie, which is so long ago, we do have Rachel McAdams back, who does she serves more of a purpose here than I thought she would have, but still just kind of feels like it's one thing when we've got a lot going on. And then I've been asking since the post-credits scene of the first movie, when are we getting Chiwetel back, and what is his purpose going to be? And we do get Chiwetel back, Mordo, and there's still something underwhelming here. I'm still not quite sure where we stand with his character, especially since we're dealing with technically a different character anyway, so I don't know. And they did bring Michael Stuhlbarg back for one scene. And he's one of those cases where they brought him back for just one scene at the beginning, so he's really not in this any more than he was in the first movie. Nor does he have much of a purpose, as far as I know, anyway, apart from that. It surprised me that he was the whiff in the credits, which makes it look like the character's a big deal. So luckily I didn't know the credit order. I would have been expecting more out of him, so luckily I didn't have to deal with that disappointment. Like when I saw him sitting in the church, I just thought it was a cameo by Michael Stuhlbarg. Really, I didn't realize he had prominent crediting. But yeah, so I guess if there's one other thing that I do want to bring up that actually makes me quite happy about this is I have said that I am in that camp where the humor the humor that the MCU is known for is not its best quality. It's very repetitive. It's the same sort of like people just awkwardly delivering lines to each other, and then those fall into awkward tangents, and that's how these movies end up almost 3 hours long each. I was surprised. Maybe the comedy was so bad that I just thought it wasn't there, but I'm pretty sure there's not many of those moments in this. Like every now and then there's like, a funny line here and there or an attempted funny line here and there. The Bruce Campbell cameo obviously is all comedy, but that works, of course. But I don't remember it falling into tangents like it usually does with that stuff. And it felt a lot like they held back a lot more on the comedy lines bit in this one. So that's greatly appreciated, and I would really like for them to continue down that road, where it's not constant like it seems to be in the other movies. Yeah, and I guess the last thing I want to mention, the last thing I wrote down here anyway, was the fact that as far as it going into the creativity, as far as the horror elements go, there's also something that I guess can only be described as a music fight. That's very interesting. Like the movie really kicks into gear in like the second half, especially the climax, which is really great also because usually when these movies are at their climax, it's about when I'm kind of zoning out, where it's like for a while now we've just had armies colliding. That's been going on for a while now, but this one really got more creative as it went and really just went all for it the more it went. So I think that's why I come out of this saying that it might not be one of the better entries in the whole series, the whole franchise. But when we get to about the halfway mark, it starts to become really interesting, especially. Even though it does have some obvious moments here and there, then unfortunately would have been cooler if we didn't know everything, thanks to the internet and everything else. Yeah, so yeah, I guess you could say it's a mixed bag in total, but there's a lot more that I like in it than what I don't. So I think that's all I can say about that. I don't even really think we spoiled anything, did we? I don't think so. So I may not bother with the spoilers. You may just know going in to an MCU video that you might hear things that are shrouded in secrecy. But with all the stuff that I'm aware of that was already out there, I think that's it. So I guess the Bruce Campbell cameo would be. I'll have it say minor spoilers or something. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully nobody gets mad. So let's go on to our second movie, which is Father Stu, which is another Mark Wahlberg true story. I feel like before they were released, I was basically getting this confused with Joe Bell, where it's almost like is this going to be Wahlberg's career now? It's just these random true story movies that end in tragedy. This is another one where I don't know whether to say there's spoilers in it because it's a true story, and it's like I didn't know where it was going because I didn't know the guy's story, but yeah, we're gonna go into some stuff that basically takes us to the end if you're worried about Father Stu spoilers for some reason. So the main reason I said I wasn't really seeing this movie right away because I didn't really care enough. I do like Wahlberg quite a bit, and I do think people really tend to downplay how good of an actor he really is. People like to say, like, oh, he acts like a douchebag in real life or something, and he has that checkered past, obviously, but people like to play it up like he's a terrible actor, and I don't believe that for a second. I think he's a very good and kind of, I guess you could say, underappreciated actor. It's weird to say that about an Oscar nominee, and somebody that's so big, but yeah, I think he's a much better actor than a lot of people give him credit for, and he gets to show that off here as well. Even if he's, trying, it almost looks like he's trying for some non-existent Oscar. I imagine some people might blow this movie off for being that as well, but Yeah, he's what keeps this movie afloat, as afloat as it can be. And like I said, the reason I was initially put off was I'd heard like a quick plot synopsis, and I saw the poster, and I had pretty much assumed this was gonna basically be a glorified Pureflix movie. If you remember, Pureflix is that company that puts out those the God's Not Dead movies and stuff like that. Essentially, I don't want to be as dramatic as saying religious propaganda movies, but that's kind of exactly what they are. And they're very harmful to very impressionable people. They are an absolutely disgusting company that puts out disgusting movies, and it's with terrible, horrible messages, but almost cult like messages. But I was curious, like, if this was going to be like one of those movies, more or less. Not that I'm, completely anti-religion, but it's like I said, it's the messaging that those movies do that is just revolting to me. And it makes people that are, genuinely good people that use religion in a sort of guidance way and don't treat it like a cult necessarily, just makes them look bad, really. That's that's kind of what I thought we were getting here a little bit, where it's not like by Pureflix, but if it was going to be in that vein, um, just a Pureflix movie with a lot of people saying fuck a lot. Um, like this movie has so many uses of the word fuck in it. That is the biggest thing I walk away from this movie with is I have no idea who this movie was made for, because it's clearly telling this guy's story, and you could clearly tell that the audience for this movie would be probably people that see Pureflix movies, or people that are at least church-going people. And I don't know about you, but all the people that I know in my life, that I know have, like, gone to church, like, regularly and religiously forever, would probably have a heart attack at the sound of the word fuck being said once. And I swear, fuck has to be said over 100 times in this. But it's a very religion based movie, so I have no idea who the audience is, or who the audience is supposed to be. Um, I don't know. I saw it so late I didn't really see it with an audience, so I have no idea like how they would react to it. Or if it's like, well, we've got the presence of Mel Gibson here. Is it like when people went to Passion of the Christ, and it's like these are all people that you would see at church, and you all just watch this gruesome slaughter, really amping up the gore as much as they can all together, and it's like, so is this a religious experience? What are we all doing? I don't know. I have no idea, but, so as far as, like, taking that out of the equation and just looking at it as a movie, about a guy's redemption arc. This guy that starts off as, he's has a brother who died at like the age of 6. So his parents are, understandably a little out of whack. His dad's clearly got an alcohol problem. His mom is, rough around the edges, but still obviously very much dealing with grief. And his parents here being Mel Gibson and Jackie Weaver. Mel Gibson, once again, playing his dad after Daddy's Home 2, so of course. So, and I believe it's Gibson's, what is it, his girlfriend is the writer and director? I didn't see that coming. I didn't know that till after the fact. I read about that after the fact, actually. So, yeah, so he's trying to impress his dad as a child, and that's not working out because he's, stern, hardened, Mel Gibson. And so he grows up to be a boxer, naturally, so you get flashbacks of the fighter, of course. And then when that has run its course, and is doing nothing for him, he decides that he's going to become an actor. And I was thinking, like, okay, first off, I'm pretty sure this movie is about a priest. I'm not sure where this is going, but this is an interesting angle. And so we spend a decent amount of time with him trying to get into acting, where he's working behind a deli counter. He's asking everybody and their brothers, like, hey, do you have friends in the industry or something like that? And he's, like, trying to find his way there. He books a commercial. That's a very funny payoff when we actually see said commercial. But then it starts to go down that path. Then he starts to legitimately stalk a woman that's at the store. She's not even at his deli counter. She's at another aisle entirely, and he spots her. And he just starts stalking her. Everybody in the movie tells him he's stalking her, and he keeps it up. And he even makes a comment about how, hey, back in the day, this was seen as romantic. So that's how the movie, like, starts. Like, that's that's the jumping off point, because it's stalking this girl that he learns she goes to a Catholic church. So he starts attending her church, trying to get laid. That's how he gets to this point. And yeah, and part of that is pretty off-putting, and it's like, really, this is the story we're telling. But at the same time, it's like, it is a dude that it was a real life dude, and this is, a guy having a redemption arc. So like, he will eventually get to that point to where it's like, you just hear about a movie where you're like, well, you see this guy starts stalking this girl, and then he ends up going to church to stalk her, and then ultimately becomes a priest. There is a lot of middle ground before that happens, before it sounds too shady and too repulsive. But there is, when you look at the different performances that Wahlberg has to do here, well, obviously he starts off and he's the guy that's been out of shape. He's got a drinking problem. He goes to bars. He gets into fights. He gets arrested a lot. He's got that weird goatee. He's got the facial hair was distracting because it makes him look so much like Donnie Wahlberg. It took me a second to get past that. But besides that, as this goes on and he does fall further and further into the church, it does have believable enough moments where it's like, we do get these stepping stones where he goes from the guy that was going to church to get laid to, literally becoming a priest. And it's having this whole turnaround. And a lot of that comes in when he has this shocking motorcycle accident. Once again, when going into this not knowing what the story was, there were some things that kind of genuinely caught me by surprise. And he's able to perform this stuff really well into the fullest, where it starts to get into like the physicality of what's going on. Because then once he, has a turnaround after this motorcycle accident, another health problem starts to take over, and it just kept coming back for this guy. And you can see definitely where there's a story here to tell about this guy, a very cinematic story to tell, a very big, inspiring redemption story to tell. The style in which this movie does it, I don't quite know that it tells that as well as it could, or if it tells the portions of it that it really should be telling. Because it takes a very long time to get us to a certain point. It takes us so long to get to where we're getting to. What the whole point of the movie is that the title of the movie is basically a spoiler. I guess you would almost say the poster is almost a spoiler also, because it's about his journey to the priesthood. But the thing about that, though, is not just with the title, but with the story we probably should be telling about this guy. Like, yeah, you can see it coming from one angle of, seeing where he came from and then how he got to this point. But once we get to, like, the last third of the movie, it kind of feels a lot more important to tell that story instead, where it's like, you have, like, 2/3 of a movie, if not more, telling the story of how he was a fuck-up, and then how he got to this point. And then, like, this point where he reaches this point is, like, the last little bit. And it almost feels like it should be the reverse of that, where we get, a decent, like, maybe 1/3 of him being a fuck-up and him, having the accident and then having a turnaround. And then the other 2/3 being him in the priesthood and how he helped other people. Because pretty much any time we see him help somebody, once he's gone down that road in this movie, it feels like it's, like, it doesn't feel very earned, and it feels kind of like one-sided, I guess you could say, where it doesn't feel so much like he's making a big impact on these people. It's more of just like, oh, I was once this, but now I'm this person, and everything that he's actually doing when he's in that role is just, like, kind of in the background to say, oh, look how much different this is from this stuff. And it's that whole thing where I guess that's why you'd make a movie like this that really goes into, going all in on being a movie that the people who would watch this movie for the story that it's telling would not normally be watching a movie like the first 2/3 of this movie. to show us the contrast of first it was this and now it's this. But I feel like that would probably have been much more effective if it was, like I said, if our fractions of the story here were a bit reversed and we got just enough background information and then him actually as the priest being the majority of the movie, I think probably would have been much more effective. And if the guy really did make an entire turnaround, probably the story he would have preferred to have told would have been, yeah, this is what it was before, but I want people to know this. I want this to be my legacy. So I feel like that was maybe a little bit of a disservice to devote that much of the, like, for almost the whole movie to be him as the fuck up. And then almost like at the last minute say, oh, but don't worry, he got to this point. And even having to overcome his health problems in order to do that also. So there was definitely a movie here, and it's definitely a story that's worth telling, but it kind of indulges in the wrong aspects of it, I think. But you especially get that vibe when we see, like Gibson is here, and he's just kind of doing the stern dad thing, and there's a clear distance between them. And a real strength starts to come through when we start to see how their relationship develops and how like Gibson kind of changes also in the process. But like I said, all of that comes in very very late when the movie is like on its last round, like in the last 15 or 20 minutes or so, and that could have been a whole arc that we could have gotten to see play out and feel even more earned when we got to that point. And because of this, it's clearly got a pacing problem. This movie, it just barely breaks 2 hours. It's like 2 hours and then a couple of minutes. But good, it feels so long. It's got a serious pacing problem. It feels like when this movie ends, you feel like you watched a miniseries, and it's just barely 2 hours. So that's, but it's still just this, and it's really feels very surface level. Also, when you see how it, focus more on one thing than another, and it's like, this is the kind of movie where the way that it ends, even though it's not completely earned, and it would have been, I feel like, much more earned if we got more of him in the priesthood or striving for the priesthood. I feel like this will easily be one of those movies, and like I said, I hate to talk down on people or anything like that, but I mean, it's just, you see enough of this and you just know it's out there. This will be the kind of movie where, like, when people go to movies not that often, where it's like the kind of people that would have gone to Passion of the Christ, but they don't go to movies typically, or they go to Pure Flix movies even though they don't go to movies all the time. They'll walk out of this saying it's probably one of the best movies they've ever seen. In 2011, you might remember, I may have even told this story in another review, I don't know, but in 2011, the movie Soul Surfer came out. The one with Anna Sophia Robb that played the girl that was attacked by the shark and then still achieved her dreams or whatever. Once again, incredible true story, not a great movie and not a great telling of that story necessarily. I was standing in the hallway either waiting for somebody to get out of the bathroom or waiting for another movie to start, and these older people, this was 11 years ago and I still remember this so vividly, a couple of older people that must have been in their 70s came out of Soul Surfer. And one of them said, I think that's the best movie I've ever seen. And it's like, can you imagine being a senior citizen and the best movie you've ever seen is Soul Surfer? That's... it's terrifying, actually. But I feel like this will be one of those movies to people that don't go to the movies that often. And normally just come to movies like this. So it'll probably hit really big with a certain crowd, but it's not like at the depths of a Pure Flix movie or anything like that. Like, there is a heart to this movie, and you can see, and especially the devotion that Wahlberg had to this role. Like I said, really should get more credit as an actor than he does, just in general. And he really commits to this too, and you could tell he really wanted to tell the story. I think I even read somewhere that he financed it with his own money because a studio didn't want to make it. So, I mean, that's, with any movie, that's admirable, just by itself. But still, it's a mediocre telling of a very fascinating, and it's a good story. So, yeah. So, I guess we can stop this here. next week is Firestarter, I think. So we'll see if that was necessary or not. And I only just recently learned that Firestarter is not a direct-to-streaming movie. That shit's going to actually be at the theater. I'm really surprised. So it just looks like a straight-to-streaming movie. But we'll see if they tell the story any better than Drew Barrymore's movie. I'm going to doubt it, but we'll see what happens. I don't know after that. Obviously, we're getting into the summer releases now, so we're going to start getting a lot of big stuff that'll eventually... Release dates move around so much anymore, I don't even try to keep track anymore. It's just like, whatever comes next week comes next week. But we're also going to have our next movie club thing where we're going to... The three of us in the chat and stuff, we're going to talk about Sleuth. That's going to be really fun. So... apart from that, I think we're doing another Q&A before that, and then obviously whatever Owen and Ashley are doing in between. So, yeah, so whatever the next thing is, I think that's it.